And welcome to another episode of the Gamerheads Podcast. My name is Roger. This week I have a very special guest. I have Mark Diaz-Truman from Magpie Games, the creators of Urban Shadows. Mark, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk about Urban Shadows. I've been reading the book.
Great.
I love it. I love it so much. But before we get into that discussion, we probably should let the audience know a little bit about who you are. So tell us about yourself and your role at Magpie Games.
Yeah, great. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Magpie Games. This is our 14th year of making games. Next year is 15, which seems kind of wild to me.
Yeah.
But we've been at it for a while. Marissa, my co-founder, and I started Magpie Games back in 2011. So it was like the indie game movement was still kind of just getting wind in its sails. And we did some like cool 6x9 black and white games. And over the last 15 years have blossomed into doing now, full color 8.5x11 games, card games, different kinds of projects, everything from, teen superheroes and anthropomorphic animals to, drug cartels and feminine horror, right? So Magpie has a really diverse catalog, and, Urban Shadows was one of those games that we did pretty early. The first edition came out in 2015. So it's really a pleasure it feels kind of like coming home to talk about doing a second edition this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and how many groups gets to do it like a second edition, let alone a first edition of a book, right? So
I mean, it's one of those things where to do a second edition, in our mind, we have to know that there's enough interest that like that would be worth our time and that worth fans' time. And then B, that there has to be something to do, right? Like, I mean, we have games like Bluebeard's Bride, for example, that kind of came out. They're just kind of perfect as they are. Like I can't imagine doing a second edition because it is what it is. It's exactly what we wanted it to be. So for this, it was a chance for us to revisit in some ways some of our younger work. Like the original version of Urban Shadows wasn't everything I wanted it to be because I'd only been a game designer for 5 years or whatever. Yeah. So now, 15 years in, it's a very different story. And that's a big part of why we wanted to do it, was to really revisit it and make it the fullest version of what it could possibly be.
Nice. Just a side note, I love Bluebeard's Wives, by the way. I love that. That book is so good. It's so interesting. I tell people about that game all the time because I think that's such a fascinating game.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating, amazing experience. It's a horror game, so people I think get into it on that level of just like, I like horror games. But it really encapsulates this amazing experience of being a woman within this patriarchal system and how you end up questioning your own identity and thoughts, right? Because this is a game about whether your husband is a terrible murderer. Spoiler, he's definitely a terrible murderer. But like, how do you feel about that? So a lot of Magpie's games, I mean, including Urban Shadows, right, are kind of about trying to do something really special with the play experience. So it's not just, this is a game in which you play knights and you're going on quests. Like, cool, that's great. There's been lots of games that have done that really well. What are we bringing to the table? And what are we doing that really is pushing the boundaries and doing something different? And sometimes that's like with Zombie World, which is one of our games. It's it's a post-apocalyptic zombie game. It's pretty straightforward. It's Walking Dead. It's Night of the Living Dead. But it's all on cards. And it all comes in one box. And there's no dice. And everything comes out of the box and you're playing in 10 minutes. So it's pushing form boundaries, right? Like how RPGs look. And sometimes with things like Urban Shadows, we've played a lot of urban fantasy games, and what would it be like to have a game that does the things we want an urban fantasy game to do, that push boundaries in both content and in function? What is the game about, and how does it do that thing? These are the questions we ask a lot as Magpie.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's talk about that then. For those that may not be familiar with Urban Shadows, can you give us a brief overview of what Urban Shadows is?
Yeah, so Urban Shadows is an urban fantasy tabletop RPG. We often call it a political urban fantasy game, in that it's not really about being a monster necessarily. Like, it's not like you're all vampires or you're all hunters, right? Try to protect ordinary people. It's instead about how communities interact with each other. So the character types span the gauntlet of all 4 of the major circles, which are the major sort of communities. They're not organizations. Like, the nonprofit community in the real world is not one organization. It's many organizations. The military community is not one organization. It's many. In the same way here, there are 4 circles within every city. mortalis, which is the people that are mortals who go back and forth between the supernatural world and the mortal world. Night, which are the characters like vampires and werewolves who kind of feed upon the mortal world, so they live at the edges of it, but they were probably once human or at least understand humanity. Power, which are like the wizards and the oracles and the immortals who like look, 50 years into the future. And then wild, which are the demons and fairies and anybody who's coming kind of from outside who cares less about the city's politics than their own stuff, right? Like, what does it mean to be part of this demonic court? Or what does it mean for me to try to become human as a monster who's been constructed by somebody else, right? Yeah. And those four communities are constantly rubbing up against each other and having conflicts and opportunities. And while night, werewolves and vampires understand each other, that doesn't mean they get along. But they definitely understand each other better than like a wizard does, right? And so it's a game that takes a lot from like stories like The Wire or even like Breaking Bad. Like there's a crime fiction kind of element to it of what happens when these different sources of power rub up against each other and come into conflict, and how do your characters as the movers and shakers of this world get caught in the middle.
Yeah. That's what I love about this game, because it takes place in... it could take place at any time period, I guess, but really, like, the idea is it takes place in modern time, right? And
right.
And the fact that there's this political struggle underneath the politics of the world that humans live in is just such a fascinating concept. And one of the things that I really loved about in the game was, try to create a character, not just like a vampire, but try to create a diverse character that's just so different than who you are as a person, right? Because like you're not a vampire in real life, so create just such a diverse character that's just so different than anything you've ever played before. And I really enjoyed that. I really thought that was a really cool idea, and really leans into like the role playing aspect of the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the goal of the goal of Urban Shadows is to give you strong tools for making great characters, but then really put the work of making that great character in your hands, right? So the way that a lot of our games work, but Urban Shadows especially, is we have what are called playbooks. So for example, you might play the Hunter playbook. It's not a class. It's not like just a set of powers. It's really like a baked in story, right? You're a hunter. You choose what you hunt. There's a whole bunch of options. And each of those options is really like interesting and dynamic, right? Like you might hunt wizards. You might hunt ghosts, right? And when you make that choice, the GM grabs that choice and runs with it and says, yeah, that's great. Let's talk about what does that look like? And then you help define that. So there's no like existing lore that we're all having to read and process and deal with. It's like, no, at the table, Roger, like you tell me, like, why do you hunt these wizards, right? And it could be anything from you're like, I just hate all wizards. Like the wizard murdered my family, right? All the way to, oh no, wizards are fine. But there's this like one group of wizards that are like dark blood wizards, and those are the ones I hunt, and other wizards sometimes protect them. I'm like, both those answers are fantastic. Like we're good with either side. And so your character kind of the playbook's like a seed, like it starts it off. It gives us some places to talk, and then that blossoms into your full character, your full experience. And we think urban fantasy in particular is about great characters, right? Like that's all successful urban fantasy things have at their core a Harry Dresden, right? Or an Anita Blake, someone who is a compelling character for us to follow along with.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. One of the questions that I had was around how you approach building Urban Shadows. So you have different mechanics. You have things like the debt systems and circles and factions, which you mentioned. But when you're approaching it, do you have a world in mind and then build the mechanics around it, or do you have the mechanics first and then build your world around it? What's your approach?
Yeah, great question. I think it definitely changes by game, right? So like there are definitely some games where we come to the table and we're like, we want the world to be like this. I'm thinking about like Bluebeard's Bride. It's like, okay, well, this is a horror world, so it's got to be in this one mansion. You can't leave the house, or like there's no horror. Like we're in this one house. You're going into these different rooms, and each room is going to be its own horror world. It's like a haunted house game, right? You go in this room, you go inside and it's scary for these reasons, and then this other room is creepy for those reasons, right? And so everything, all the mechanics in it are kind of rooted in like, how do we deliver on that exact feeling? But then with something like Urban Shadows, I think we actually step back into really thinking about like, what does it look like to play, say, 15 or 20 sessions of this game? Like, urban fantasy is a genre in which people, they don't want to play a one shot. Like urban fantasy one shot is fine, I guess, but the joy of it is like going 17 sessions so that your werewolf boyfriend gets murdered and you have to avenge him, and then you actually find out he's not dead, and then he comes back, but then he's actually like behind all the big bad stuff, and then you get back together because there's this other big bad, and like the drama, the soap opera drama that can only happen when you like have some time, right? So we're also thinking a lot about like what makes this a sustainable, repeatable experience so that when we make characters, there's a lot of rich material for us to use in session after session, but the sessions themselves work at the right pace to provide a story that's like weaving many different parts of the player's experiences in together. So there's a lot of emphasis for us on play in terms of like, what does it look like to really play this game? And we're very lucky with Urban Shadows in that we get more feedback for Urban Shadows than virtually every other Magpie product combined. Because I think we got a lot of players who played a lot of urban fantasy games and they have big opinions about what works and what doesn't. And they're really sharp. Like, people will message us and be like, this power that you have on this playbook, this is going to cause a problem because if you combine it with this thing over here. And I'm always like, wow, you're right. Like, we'll tweak that, we'll fix that. But lots of great feedback because those people are playing the game and engaged with the game, and they've played a lot of games. And that really leads for us to think about an experience of, how do I get to that moment where you are making a choice in the game that's real, right? Like, am I going to rat this person out? Am I going to murder this person who's defenseless? Am I going to pursue this goal that is going to change my character's future? And have that choice really matter. Make it clear that it matters and make it clear that it's your choice. How do I create those moments over and over and over again within this urban fantasy world that, again, like we just talked about, you as the player have helped me, the GM, construct, right? How do we do that and have that be a workable thing that happens again and again and again?
Yeah, I love that. A question off of that then, because this game, I mean, there is dice rolling in this game for sure. But I feel like the dice rolling comes into play when, and you say this in the book, where you're at basically a point where you don't know what's going to happen. The uncertainty is going to happen, right? Like, could I pursue, or could I persuade somebody to do something? Could I, push somebody over the edge and like get them to fall and stuff like that? But a lot of it has to do with role playing. Like, there's a lot more of like storytelling and like you said, that the characters and the ceremony, master ceremonies kind of plays that whole thing together, right? They make this whole story together. What do you tell people that are going to like jump into this game for the first time? Like, what are some advice you give to people when they're first playing Urban Shadows?
Yeah, it's a good question around like, what is a game supposed to do? So if you look at something like, most people are playing, maybe it's their first role-playing games like D&D or Call of Cthulhu, or even something weirder like, I don't know, Mutants and Masterminds or whatever, right? And each of those games has a different, what we think of as like transaction and focus, meaning why do we roll dice? Like, what's the point of rolling dice? And what are we doing in this game? So if you're playing D&D, you're often rolling dice to decide if the tasks that you're doing succeed or fail. You're like, I want to hit this orc with a sword. I want to break down this door. I want to convince this bartender to let us stay here for the night with no money. Whatever it is, you're rolling the dice to see if you can do that thing. And the dice roll is always pretty much the same. It's a D20. And then it's like a little slot machine. Like, sometimes it's awful and sometimes it's great. And like, it's always fun to roll the dice, right? And then if you look at something like Call of Cthulhu, then you're like, well, I'm doing a heckin' investigation. Maybe I would like to not roll the dice very often. Maybe I would like to ask the GM questions and get information, and I don't really want to try to shoot the monster that makes me insane when I look at it, right? And so your relationship with the dice is really different within that. And I think a lot of role players tend to play one or two kinds of games, and they may not realize that like dice rolling is not the same from game to game to game. It's really different. And in Urban Shadows, what dice rolling means is it means that a moment of uncertainty has emerged in the fiction. That might be because you're trying to kick down a door. But like, let's say you're playing the Tainted, who's one of like, he's a human who sold their soul to a demon, and now they have like demonic powers, but they have to work for a demon. My friend calls it racketeering for hell, right? Like, you work for the mob, right? And the mob is demons, right? And so like, you go, you say, I kick down this door. I'm not going to ask you to roll for that.
Yeah.
Like you're a demon. Like you have a form you can activate that's like makes you 7 feet tall or whatever. If you're in that form, I just say, yeah, the door shatters and splinters. What do you do next, right? But like if you're playing the Aware, and the Aware is like a Veronica Mars detective, like she's just got introduced to this supernatural world. She doesn't know anything yet, and she's trying to break down the door, probably because something's chasing her. Then I'm going to be like, well, hey, look, like you're just an ordinary person. Like this is a pretty heavy door. What are you doing? And when she says, well, I grab the fire extinguisher and I slam at the lock, then great. Now we have a roll, right? Because there's uncertainty. And that uncertainty then means that rolling dice in the game is actually really important. Like we want there to be a lot of rolls, and we want every roll to feel like, whew, like I'm excited, like let's go, like I want to succeed, but if I miss, something interesting is going to happen. And what that means is that we encourage all the role play you do to actually be pointed at doing interesting things, right? So it's not about like using a funny voice. Excuse me. You could use a funny voice. That's great. Funny voices are great. But like what I really want is for your Aware to like have that werewolf boyfriend and be like from minute one, be like, I am in over my head. I have made some bad decisions. I am a TV character who is excited about the supernatural world, but I have a kid, and that kid is not getting enough attention because I'm mixed up with these werewolves, right? And then the role playing you do, it doesn't have to come from some performative place, if that makes sense. It's not improv acting. Most people are not good, myself included, are not good improv actors. It's a skill, and it's hard. But instead to say, I just want you to make real decisions, right? I want you to show up to the session and have the GM give you real choices and have you make real decisions. So for example, if you're like, you get home and, your kid's going to be home in 10 minutes, but there's a werewolf waiting for you in your kitchen. And he's like, look, you need to stay away from these other werewolves or I'm going to kill you. And you're like, well, I need you to get out of my house before my kid comes home because that's going to be really awkward to explain, right? Then all of the decisions you're making, all of the things you're experiencing, they're not like a performance that you're doing for others. I mean, they can be, but they don't have to be. They're you saying, okay, what do I do to get this werewolf out of my kitchen? Like maybe I promise him, I'm going to lie to him. I'm going to tell him, I won't talk to anybody anymore. You scared me off. Or I'm going to hit him over the head with something and try to drag his body in. Whatever I'm doing, it's real decisions. And so it's role playing from this idea of not I'm playing a role like an actor, but I'm playing a role in the sense that I'm taking on this person and I'm making the decisions this person makes.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's probably one thing that when I introduce games to people, that's the first thing that they say, well, I'm not an actor. Or I don't know how to act. And it's like, like you said, like it's not about acting. It's about making choices that your character would make. Right. So, I love that. So this is the second edition. What did you learn from the first edition, and what was the biggest difference between the first and second editions?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like, what is the difference between first and second is a question we get a lot. And I think what's hard about that question is, when we set out to do second edition, I didn't want it to be like, okay, well, here's first edition, and first edition has this focus, and second edition has this different focus, like two branches. I think sometimes editions can be really useful when they have those. Like, you're getting to kind of choose this kind of flavor versus that. I mean, the different editions of D&D are not the same game, right? They're very different. You engage with them in different ways. Somebody who says that fourth edition D&D is their favorite game is not wrong. Like, that's their favorite. Like they're like engaging with it, right? So, but what we wanted to do was really create like the best, most fullest version of it. So a good example is that in the original game, there were 10 playbooks. Some of the circles of the 4 circles, they only got 2 instead of 3. And I really wanted to put, make it even across all 4 circles. You get the same number of playbooks. And I had 2 playbooks in mind that I didn't know how to do when I was a younger designer. One of them is the Sworn, who's like a supernatural cop. And another is the Imp, who's a demon who's escaped their contract. And so now they have like a business that they run. They're sort of like Lauren from Angel or Howie from Uncut Gems. Like they're a hustler and a schemer. And I didn't really know how to do those. Like, what did that look like, right? And how would it work? And so now coming back to it, I was like, oh, I know exactly how to do this. Like, let's set up these things for this playbook. They're going to push it in these directions. Let's let them, make contributions to the fiction that are going to make them feel like they really have chosen this. And so we were able to expand the game to include those, and they're just better. Like the game is just better with having them in it. And it also increases the number of options. Like there are literally thousands of different combinations of playbooks.
Yeah.
Within just the core 12, right? Yeah. Because it's, you have 3 players, it's 12 times 11 times 10. And that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
You had 4 or 5 players, and it's even more. And so like those kinds of things of like, we rewrote a lot of the playbooks. We refocused a lot of the playbooks, polished them up. Some of them came over with just like, some spit shine and a little bit of editing to make them fit the new system. Some of them got a really deep rewrite. Like good example is the Aware. The Aware was a detective in the first one, and they had a lot of powers around like knowing what other people were thinking or doing. And as we talked about it, we were like, wait a second though, they're like the new person. How do they know what people think and feel? They're completely brand new. So they should be stumbling around like an idiot, making mistakes and causing trouble and then getting out of that trouble. And so now they're much more of a heart playbook. They convince other people, hey, do the right thing. Like you should not let that guy die or whatever. But as they have moments of intimacy, not, which could be sex or like a close emotional moment or whatever, they actually get to use their heart stat to do mind things once they've gotten to know people. So the Aware is now incentivized to get to have messy relationships with everybody. And as they do so, they start to learn the system and they start to figure out what people are thinking and feeling. And then they probably need to change playbooks. Like they have to grow up out of being the Aware. And that's a much more clear arc in 2 than it was in 1.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think, and I'm sure there are players that play and have played the first edition that now are going to move into the second edition. I mean, are there going to be times where they'll be able to continue their character? They're going to have to change their character? I mean, what were your thoughts around what those players that move from the first edition and have characters that they want to continue with into the second edition?
Like, you mean like how does somebody take first edition and move that into second?
Yeah. Like, let's say I had an Aware, for instance, in the first edition, and now, I mean, it might be different because the character has grown, like over all those times that I've been playing. But are there things that I guess my character will have to adapt to? Like, are there big changes that I'm going to have to be like, oh, like this doesn't work the same way now that I'm in the second edition?
Yeah. I think that the first thing is that one of the great things about Urban Shadows is how easy it is to spin up a new campaign, right? So very few people, I think, are going to continue first into second. Like they'll resolve their first edition game and then they'll start a new second edition game because there's a lot of ways to pick up. It's also possible to kind of switch between seasons as we think of it. Like we don't really think of this as being a campaign because the campaign draws its roots from like wargaming, right? Like I'm going to play a campaign of missions. This is more like television. It's like season 1 of The Wire is about West Baltimore. Season 2 is about the docks. Like, and yet the characters kind of continue across that. Like we have, so for example, you're Aware maybe in season 1, like you play through all of that. And season 2, you actually say like, actually, how about I swear an oath to that wizard organization and now I can play the Sworn. I'm still the same person. But now my story is really different. Or I signed a contract with that demon at the end of season 1. I'll be a tainted now, right? Or I got turned into a vampire. I'll be the vamp now. And you get to take some stuff from your old playbook and you have some stuff from your new playbook. And it's kind of like a shift in your story, a new direction for that character. Also possible that half the players retire their characters. Those characters become NPCs and they get new characters, right? That's super fun. Like to see some new and old characters at the same time. But for the most part, if you're moving from 1 to 2, a lot of the stuff is the same. It's just better refined. The GM section, for example, is virtually the same because it's one of the best things that we've ever made. It's like we really invested a lot of time in helping people understand how to run Powered by the Apocalypse games. I've had an enormous number of people come up to me and say they learned to run Powered by the Apocalypse games from Urban Shadows in particular. And so we kept a lot of that material and a lot of the things that worked in that. But some of the stuff that changed, like the moves, in Powered by the Apocalypse games, a move activates when you get that moment of uncertainty, but it's keyed to that moment of uncertainty. So you don't just roll a neutral. You're not like, oh, roll perception. There's no perception. There's instead a move for figuring someone out or, there's a move for turning to violence. And so when those moves kick in, those new mechanics will be sharper, better, like more focused. So like moving from first to second is not hard, but I actually think it's a great opportunity to like start over, start a new city, start a new season. And I think we haven't had a lot of people try to transition as much as we've had people be excited to start something new.
Cool. That's awesome. One of the things that I do love about this game too is the idea of retirement, where most of your characters end up not always, but could end up being an NPC where they're bad, right? Where they got consumed by their own darkness. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that is so different than, let's say you have a character that you're trying to level up to like level 50, where they're like this paladin and that everybody loves and like continues on with their story, where the story can continue, it just may not be the same way as like a D&D campaign.
Yeah. Well, I think so. The interesting thing here, right, is that in that model of like television, right? Like when you're watching TV, characters don't just get infinitely better until they're gods, right? Like that's not usually how The Wire works, right? Like you maybe get more experience, but you're also more jaded, or like, some bad things happen to you and you now have different feelings about things. But you're also like, we do like progression, right? New powers, new ideas, new strengths, like that's exciting too. So to balance that, what we have is that there is an advancement system, but one part of that advancement system is, as you've hinted at, maybe not always great for your character, which is that there's this thing called corruption. And as you mark corruption, you get cool new powers. And the only problem is that they require you to mark more corruption. And eventually, if your corruption track fills enough times, you become a villain, right? Meaning you actually fall, you hand your character sheet to the GM, and now you're an NPC, and the GM gets to use your character as a villain or as a threat against the other PCs. And what's fun about this, first of all, is that it's a fun way of dealing with this idea that like the darkness offers power, right? Because we've tried to do that in RPGs, and a lot of times it's like, well, what is the cost of that darkness? How powerful can that power really be, right? But as an example, one of the powers on the vamp sheet is you're the vamp, right? You can mark a corruption, and you can pursue an ordinary human anywhere they go. They cannot escape from you, and you can murder them at any time. And so like that's that moment of being this perfect predator, right? And all it costs you is a corruption, which is like nothing, right? I mean, heck, it's going to get you more cool powers, and you do that a bunch of times. You terrorize your enemies. You do all the things you want to do, and then you look down at your sheet and you're like, oh no, like I only have like 2 more of these. Like how do I? And so you get this great moment in the fiction where players are like, no, man, no, I don't do that anymore. Like I'm trying to be a better person. Right? I'm trying to not be a monster, right? Because I understand that at some point I won't be able to come back from it, right? And every playbook has a different attitude towards corruption, right? Like the vamp corrupts when very obviously they feed on people who are not willing, right? So so if you're willing to do the work to convince people to let you feed on them, then you can stay uncorrupted. But if you just start feeding on people, doesn't matter if they were trying to hurt you or whatever, like you get corruption. The sworn gets corruption when they break their oath to their masters, right? And you're going to want to break your oath because your masters aren't always right. So like this kind of like corruption being this temptation, like really a temptation in and out of character is like a powerful part of what I think makes Urban Shadows work.
I love that. So one of the other questions I have is, and you kind of alluded to this, but I'd like to get more of your thoughts on this, is the fact that the market, especially for a tabletop RPG, is very crowded. And there's really new games launching on a regular basis as well. What is your approach to making Urban Legends stand out? And is there a particular gap in the market that you're aiming to fill?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that, publishing doesn't work on any sort of reasonable time frame such that I could say, Roger, I planned this perfectly. This is going to come out just when the market needs it. Like, no, I mean, we kickstarted this in 2020. Avatar was a big disruptor of Magpie's internal operations. Really, really hard for us to do anything when we had 85,000 backers waiting for these Avatar books. I had some personal stuff in 2023. It was a tough year for me. Some folks passed away, some other health challenges. So like by the time you get to 2025 and we're done, we're ready to release, then whatever's happening in the world in 2025 is what's happening. I can't control it, right?
Yeah.
But I will say that I think that, Marissa and I met at a vampire LARP. Like, we have been urban fantasy people for a long, long, long time. And I know that, urban fantasy used to be, through the World of Darkness and other things, witchcraft, other games, there used to be a really, really robust pipeline of urban fantasy stuff that was coming out every year. When I was a kid, like, I knew there was going to be new stuff from White Wolf and other publishers just all the time. And I don't think there are fewer urban fantasy players now, but there are definitely fewer urban fantasy books. And I think that some of that is that they're hard. Like, one of the things we really wrestled with is, what does it mean to have an urban fantasy game when you have a computer in your pocket that has all of the world's information? Like, don't we live in a cyberpunk dystopia? Like, how do you define urban fantasy when, like, our world looks increasingly like Mike Pondsmith's vision from 1985? Right? Yeah. Like, so, like, what does urban fantasy look like? What room is there in urban fantasy after so much good urban fantasy came out from 1989 to 2021? Like, what do you do in that, 30-year period, 20-year period? And so a lot of what Urban Shadows does is it tries to break down some of those ways that urban fantasy works. It's not about a big lore dump that you have to absorb. It's about certain tenets like debt or status or, corruption. And then it lets your players bring in new ideas to make it exciting in the moment. Right. So, one of Marissa's campaigns that ran for 40 sessions of first edition or something like that was, in her world, vampires had, she was an emotional vampire. That was her character. So she fed on people's emotions, and people had an eye in there. Like, vampires had an eye that opens on their hand to feed on emotions. And so then there were other characters who were like blood vampires, but they were like dark and corrupted and like had fallen. And so they're like kind of the bad guy vampires. And then there was a hunter who actually was missing an arm because she used to be a vampire, so she cut off her own arm. And so, like, this is great stuff, but it's not going to fit everybody's table. So it's like, it works so great for her table because it was what she had built with her friends at the table. And I think a lot of Urban Shadows is trying to get away from this idea that there's like one vampiric history or one thing where werewolves care about, and says, well, I don't know, Roger, you're going to set your game in Minneapolis or Seattle or Atlanta. What do vampires care about in Atlanta? What would it be like to be a vampire in Atlanta? And let you and your table figure out the details with lots of support. Like, I think it's important to note, like, it's not just, I don't know, Roger, you write an urban fantasy novel, you're smart. It's saying, like, here are the choices we think you need to make. You should make these choices, and then build on them through play to discover and play to find out what happens, so that the story that you tell is really rich and different and interesting, but it's ultimately much more yours than it is if I gave you a bunch of cool lore, right? And that's not to say Urban Shadows doesn't have a setting. Like, we have a setting chapter. It talks about the core ideas. But, like, what we talk about is, what are the core ideas that are true across every city, right? Across every place. There's always the 4 circles. There's always status. There's always debt. But the specifics of, like, this city has a vampiric election once a year. This city is run by demons for the most part. Those are up to you and your group at home.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then one of the things too I appreciate about the book is that there'll be times where they'll give examples of how, like, the player like asks the GM, like, can I do this, or what's happening here? Or they'll give it, like, there's a nice paragraphs where they kind of talk through, like, here's the mechanic, here's how it's played out in the game, and nice examples of that, where I think, I know other games do that, but I think this really plays really well into this because of the fact, like you said, really leans into the team or the group that you're playing with, creating the story together. So,
it's
you do a really good job with that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, examples are always a place for us to, like, show you, like, what we think what fun about the game. I want you to read an example and be like, that sounds awesome. Like, why am I not playing this game? And we have a lot of characters and moments in that are just drawn from play. They're just drawn from playtesting. Like 90% of the examples in the book were something that at one point, I was playing a game and that happened, and I was like, oh, that was awesome. Like, I need to note that down because that was a cool moment. But, like, there's a thing there where you said, like, the team, right? And what's fun about Urban Shadows is you're not a team. Like, you're true. You're not like enemies, but you're not like friends necessarily. You're like your people. You know each other, and sometimes you're going to be at odds with each other, and sometimes you're going to be be on the same team. It's very common for like a scene to start and like the hunter to be like, I'm going to go talk to the vamp and I'm going to kill him this time if he doesn't give me what I want. And then halfway through the scene, the two of them both like turn and look at the demon that just came in the room and they're like, okay, well, let's like, we'll deal with our stuff later. Like right now we just both need to get out of this room. Right. And that kind of like shifting allegiances and alliances, like that's super fun. And it's what makes it ultimately, I think, political, right? Is that it's not about like, you're a vampire, you have to do this one thing, that's the one thing you care about. It's about shifting power, shifting alliances, and shifting parts of the city.
Yeah, I love that. And also the fact that you can't, I mean, it's encouraged that you don't have two characters in the same circle, right? Was it the same circle?
No, you can definitely, the same playbook, right? You don't want two characters in the same playbook in the sense that you want them to, like every playbook is kind of like a story orientation. Like the werewolf has a territory and they're trying to figure out how they want to relate to their territory. And if there's another werewolf who also has a territory, then it's kind of like, where's your spotlight, man? Like, where's your cool thing? But if it's like there's a werewolf who has a territory and the vamp lives in that territory and the wizard comes to that territory regularly because his like sanctum is there, then like now we've got like this cool layers of stuff and everybody's layer is adding something as opposed to just conflicting.
Sure. After playing Urban Shadows, what do you hope players take away from their experience?
Well, I mean, I think that it's so hard when you make a game that's really trying to push boundaries of people's experiences with games and with urban fantasy, is that like I feel kind of bad saying, well, I think you should take away this. Like I'm actually excited for you to take away a variety of experiences. And what I want is for those experiences to be emotionally engaging. And sometimes, depending on the player, they're emotionally engaging sad, like a tragedy, like a sense of loss as your character falls to corruption. Or it could be standing strong against the darkness and finding some way to like be the hero in a world where heroes are very few and far between, right? But what I think I really want is for them to engage the city, like to engage the politics of the city, not as a thing that is separate from them. Like it's not about NPCs making decisions and you living with them, or like some history where all the most important events happened 3,000 years ago, you know, and you're just living in the ashes of it, right? I want you to feel like the decisions you made about your interests and the interests of your people you care about and the city really spiral out into a sense of change and, you know, dynamic storytelling, right? So I want you to feel like at the end of your campaign, the end of your season, end of whatever it is, like that you have told a story in which your character changed, the city changed, other people's characters changed. And maybe like everything's still kind of the same in the sense that like there's still elites, there's still people at the bottom of the pyramid, like power is still a real thing, but like some things got shaken up, some things got changed because of your decisions. And that if you retire to safety, for example, you say, I'm going to hang up my hat and be a normal person, or you die and you get to use your cool only when you die move, which is a thing every playbook has, or you corrupt out, that and whatever your character's end is a really satisfying conclusion to this drama, right? Like it's not just, I did a couple quests and we had fun throwing dice around. It's like I want you to be left with moments that you can't stop thinking about. And, you know, I was actually just thinking the other day that I don't know of another hobby that I've ever had in which I can remember so absolutely and clearly, like things that have happened to me. Right? Like I've played a lot of Fortnite. I don't really remember any of it. Like I won some matches, I guess. I don't remember. But like there's moments where I'm playing Burning Wheel, right? And like this character throws herself from the top of a spire. And one of the people that's playing, you know, that's his mother, and he rolls and he misses his roll and she slips through his fingers and she plummets to the ground. And I can see it so clearly. And like, I will remember for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I want you to have some of those experiences with Urban Shadows where you are like struck by this moment, this choice, these elements that you will just tell that story forever. Right. And it will be that kind of impact on you. And I know all kinds of games generate that, but I think what we've tried to do with Urban Shadows is give you the tools to set the stakes you want to set and then have a system that reinforces drama, not just sort of like ticking down hit points or just kind of like trying to get some tasks done, but that really drives home the drama of the situations that your characters are in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find the book? How can people get the book?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's available in retail stores all over. Go to your favorite local game store. They'll have it. If they don't have it, tell them to order it. It's available through distribution really broadly. You can also get it on our website at magpiegames.com. We're happy to ship it to you. In fact, in addition to the book, we have a cool GM screen, which has some GM notebooks with it as well. We have some cool dice. We have a cool dice tray. Like, there's some other stuff that you can check out. But of course, the cool thing is that the book is out. And for me especially, having worked on this for a bunch of years and having, this is like the 10th anniversary of the original release. Like, there's a lot of it that feels like I've been working on this game for 10. I have not actually been working on it for 10 years, but it feels like I've been working on it for 10 years. There's something really special about being able to hand people a copy of the book and say, it's ready. Like, play it. It's polished. It's exactly what I want it to be. It's exactly what we want it to be. Please check it out as it is. And so you can find it on DriveThruRPG if you're just in PDFs, or through our website. And we've got it available for sale now.
Nice. Well, congratulations on the release. I'm excited to get a game going myself. And thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and meeting with me and talking about Urban Shadows. This was really fun hanging out with you and talking about it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Roger. Really great questions. I'm excited to hear about your campaign and which playbooks your players choose, because that's actually like the most interesting decision. Is you can just tell me which 4 or 5 playbooks they choose, and I'll have a pretty good idea of where the story is going.
That's awesome. Listeners, I will put a link in our show notes where you can go and get the game yourself. If you pick up the game, let us know. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Until next week, everyone, stay safe and game on. Bye.
Bye.